Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a little bit of technical analysis on Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency markets, and more specifically, we're going to be zooming into the Bitcoin short term, and we're going to be looking at a bearish pennant that Bitcoin finds itself in at the moment. As you can see, Bitcoin is currently under a downtrend of resistance and above an uptrend of support, putting it in a bearish pennant. It's a bearish pennant because we have a bearish trend leading into it, as I'm sure you guys are aware by now, and that would normally indicate that Bitcoin is about to break bearish. But the interesting thing is that contradicts with the other technicals that we're going to be looking at in today's video. For instance, the Bitcoin daily RSI is still sitting down here below 20. For instance, we also have bullish divergence on the RSI on the 4-hourly and on the hourly chart. So right now, the technicals are kind of pointing us in two different directions, and I want to zoom in, do some technical analysis on Bitcoin, and really get to the bottom of where we think Bitcoin is going to be going over the next couple of days and what path it will take to get there. So without much further ado, let's go ahead and get into this video. We are going to be doing a little bit of fundamental analysis at the end of the video. You can probably see that we're going to be talking about Bakkt being delayed a little bit. That was yesterday's news, but since there wasn't a video up yesterday, I'm going to discuss that and give you my 2 cents on that later on in the video. Anyway, let's go ahead and get on into the short-term technical analysis, because what I was about to say I think is going to happen may be happening right before our eyes. What we're seeing Bitcoin do right now is, as you can see, it's been losing price action since the beginning of this video, and since this video will be live an hour or so after it's recorded, you guys can go and check your charts and see if I'm right on this, but what I think is probably going to happen here is that since Bitcoin had already been trending downwards, we can see that there's a bearish trend moving into this pennant, making this a bear pennant. Typically, you see Bitcoin, or whatever market in general, actually break bearish out of a bear pennant. More often than not, you will see a bearish break come out of them. And in fact, we've seen one recently. We saw a bearish pennant form right over here. We saw Bitcoin in a bear pennant, and it kind of traded sideways out of it. It traded sideways a little bit, but we did eventually get a break, and honestly, you could redraw this, something like that. That's stretching it a little bit, but my point is Bitcoin has been in many a bear pennant over its history, and this is no exception. But right now, Bitcoin is in another one, and more often than not, they are going to break bearish. I'm not saying it's going to break bearish, but I do give it more weight that it's going to break bearish. So let me go ahead and point where I think we're going to see Bitcoin go. What we've seen Bitcoin do over the last couple of days is it's established a very strong bottom. And actually, this is something I've been talking about I wanted to see Bitcoin do. I wanted to see Bitcoin try and establish a really strong, healthy bottom. Let's come out here to the 4 hours so we can see this a little bit better. Because we saw Bitcoin have a very nice floor of support at $6,000 for the entire year up until about a week and a half ago. Actually, about 8 days ago. I believe it was Wednesday when we first saw Bitcoin drop below $6,000. And ever since then, I've been waiting for Bitcoin to reestablish some level of support, some floor that we could start doing technical analysis on. And lately, what we've seen Bitcoin do is come down here and establish a very strong level of support, it seems, at $4,000. Now, if you guys will recall to before we broke $6,000, I always said that if we break $6,000, we are headed straight to $5,000, and we're probably not going to hold at $5,000. And it seems that that was the correct thing to say, because Bitcoin has not held at $5,000. We've gone even further below. What we've seen Bitcoin do instead is come down here and establish really strong bottoms at $4,000, at least for the time being. Because what we've seen here over the last couple of weeks, and really over the last week in general, is that Bitcoin has seen a lot more volume flow back into it. And I can see that in my YouTube analytics also, so I'm going to do a little bit of TA on my YouTube analytics, because generally when there's a lot more volume and a lot more interest in the space, my videos do better. And lately, if you go back on the channel, the most recent video has gotten 8,500 views or so. It's a little bit above average. So we do see that there's some more interest coming back into the space. We do obviously see statistically that there is some more volume coming back into the space. And overall, there does seem to be more retail interest in the space in general, because Bitcoin is finally doing something. It's like that meme where you're poking someone, saying do something, you know, the stick figure. I think half of you guys know what I'm talking about. That's basically what we've been doing with Bitcoin. We've been saying do something. Even if it's bearish, we're bored, do something interesting. I don't care what it is. And that's basically what I've been saying. And we finally have had that happen. And what we've seen happen because of that is we've seen a lot of volume come back into the space. And one thing that we've also seen recently is that we saw a lot of that volume come back in on this little wick right down here where Bitcoin went down to $4,000. We saw a very big volume candlestick right here, and we've seen a lot of volume surrounding it. And that's typically what you see at the bottom of a market. You typically see something like that happen. You see a lot of volume come in at the turning point of a market, which leads me to believe that $4,000 is, at the very least, a temporary bottom. I'm not calling it as a permanent bottom, but for the time being, it does seem to be a strong level of support that I think we're probably going to hold at least for a little while, because that's going to lead us into the next topic about the bears being exhausted. But there is one more thing I want to talk about before we get on into that, and that shows up on the daily chart. Let's go ahead out to the daily chart. And guys, I am bouncing around a little bit here. I hope you're able to follow me. I'm bouncing around a little bit because I have to catch up on the things I didn't get to discuss yesterday. I'll talk about why there wasn't a video yesterday at the end of this video. But the one other thing that I do want to talk about is out here on the daily chart for Bitcoin. Because if you guys will remember, I love Bollinger Bands. Bollinger Bands are one of my favorite technical indicators. They're not my favorite, but I do really like them. And as you can see, we've been very overextended on the BBs, the Bollinger Bands, for some time here. We've seen Bitcoin come out here and trade on the outside of these bands for the majority of this little downtrend. And Bitcoin doesn't do that a whole lot. What you normally see is that Bitcoin will do that in an uptrend or a downtrend. And normally if it's really overextended on these bands and is riding on the outside of them instead of on the inside of them like they were right here. See how they're riding on the outside of them? And right now we're almost outside of the daily Bollinger Bands. Typically when you see that, we're seeing a very, very major uptrend or downtrend that's probably about to reverse in a big way. Let me show you the last couple of times that really happened in a substantial way. The last time that happened in a very big way on the daily chart was back over here when Bitcoin was looking extremely bullish. There were a lot of people calling for a new bull market to be starting over here because we were getting close to breaking the 200 daily simple moving average, which was right up here somewhere, right about there. We saw a lot of bullish exuberance, and we saw that get absolutely destroyed because right over here we saw the Bitcoin ETF got delayed. We saw the Winklevoss Bitcoin ETF get rejected. We saw a lot of bearish news come into the space, and a couple of bearish technicals forced us downwards. But because we were riding on the outside of these Bollinger Bands, we had a good technical reason to believe that a big reversal was going to come. But that's not the most major one that we can look at, because if we come back over here and we look at the 2017 bull market leading up into the parabolic uptrend up to $20,000, we saw the Bitcoin market was trading on the outside of the Bollinger Bands a lot. We saw Bitcoin go outside of the Bollinger Bands a couple of times here. On the Coinbase chart, we went up to $20,000 before the actual all-time high, and on Bitfinex and many of the other charts, we didn't actually do that. We only went up to about $17,000, but nevertheless, we did ride the outside of these Bollinger Bands. And it's not just Bollinger Bands, guys. I'm making a point here. Just hang with me. As you can see, RSI got up here to around 93, 94. We saw RSI was way overbought when we were running up to $20,000. So we saw RSI was extremely overbought when we were running up to the climax of the bull market, and we saw Bollinger Bands were showing that we should be seeing some kind of major reversal coming over the next couple of days on Bollinger Bands here at the end of the 2017 bull market. And what we're seeing right now is very reminiscent of that, except in the bearish direction. As you can see, Bitcoin's RSI came to basically the inverse mirrored RSI figure of about 8 down here. If we come down here and I drag this up a little bit, we can see RSI came down here to around 8 or 9, which is a really low RSI figure, guys, which indicates we're probably going to see some kind of bounce. We'll be discussing that in a little bit, but I want to make this point first, that what we're seeing right now, this capitulation, this downtrend, this crash, whatever you want to call it, this movement that we've seen over the last couple of days is looking very similar to the one we saw at the end of 2017. Now, I am by no stretch of the imagination. I want to make myself very clear saying that we have seen the bottom. I am not saying that we have seen the bottom. I am not saying that the bottom is in yet. I'm not exactly sure where the bottom is, nor is anyone else. And I'm not totally convinced it's at $4,000 for the long term, but for the time being, I do think it's an important level of support. The point I'm making is that the market we've seen lately looks very similar to the market at the end of the bull market. And I'm not saying we're right up here. I'm not saying we're right up here. We could be right here in this bull market. We could be right here. We could be right here. My point is, I think we're somewhere in this stretch of the market analogous on the bearish side rather than on the bullish side. I think we're probably going to see a permanent bottom form in the next couple of months that we're going to be able to bounce from. Is that $4,000? Is that $3,500? Is that $3,000? Is that $2,500? We're going to see, guys. Time's going to tell. But like I said, we need a little bit more time to develop the market. Now, the reason I brought all that up is because I'm talking about a bounce here in today's video, because what I'm going to expect to happen here, let me go ahead and put my cards on the table. Since Bitcoin is in this bearish pennant right here, Bitcoin probably is going to break bearish out of it. It's possible that Bitcoin breaks bullish out of this, partially because of that daily RSI being so low. But what I would think is most likely here, and since this is kind of a multi-step, multivariate equation about how the market's going to move, it's very possible that Bitcoin doesn't do this. But what seems most likely out of 10 or 20 different scenarios, so this probably has like a 15% chance of happening, but out of all of the scenarios, this seems like the most likely of them. I think what's probably going to happen is Bitcoin's going to break bearish out of this pennant. It's going to come down here to support, and it's going to bounce. That's what I think is going to happen. It looks like this is going to be a bottoming pattern where Bitcoin had its first bottom down here. It goes into this pennant, and then it breaks bearish out of it. We come down here and set a double bottom. Now, I think it's very likely that we break bearish out of this, but I think it's a little less likely that we bounce here. I think it's more likely that we bounce. I think it's more likely that we bounce, but I'm not giving it like a 60, 70, 80% chance of happening. I think it's just slightly more likely that we get a bounce here. And the reason I say that, the reason I think we're probably going to have some kind of bounce leads me into the next point in today's video. And that has to do a lot with technicals, guys. You guys know this is a technical analysis channel, so let's go ahead and drop some TA. The couple of different things that I want to talk about have to do with RSI divergence and RSI in general. One thing that we see here on the hourly chart and on the 4-hourly chart, as you can see, Bitcoin has quite obviously been making lower lows, but on the hourly chart, what you can see is that the RSI has actually been making higher lows. And what that is called bullish divergence, and that's a very, very strong signal of a bullish reversal, going from a bearish downtrend to a bullish uptrend. You see this happen before a lot of bullish movements. Not all of them, but a lot of times when you see this kind of bullish divergence, especially on 2 time frames, as you can see here, it also shows up on the 4-hourly. We see 4-hour bullish divergence as well. Right there, we see some uptrend in the RSI and a downtrend in the bottoms. Normally, when you see that kind of movement, you're going to see some kind of bullish reversal and some kind of uptrend. Now, like I said, there is room for Bitcoin to break bearish out of this and come down and retest support before we get our uptrend. But a lot of times when you see bullish divergence, especially on 2 time frames like that, you're probably going to see some kind of bullish movement. And it really wouldn't surprise me to see some kind of bullish movement, considering how oversold we are on the RSI. Guys, it's very important that we understand how oversold we are on the RSI. RSI has not been below 10 on the daily chart. I don't think it's ever been below 10 on the daily chart on the Coinbase chart, and you have to go a very long way back on the Bitfinex chart to find that. Let's go ahead and get our cross here. Look down here at the bottom of our screen. It doesn't look to me like we've seen RSI go this low ever on the Bitfinex chart. We certainly didn't do it in the 2014-15 bear market. That really indicates some kind of bounce to me, guys. It may happen in a day or two. It may happen in the next couple of days. We might even come back down to 9 because right now we're sitting around, was it 13 or 14 right now? It's very possible we come back down here and set like a double bottom, if you want to call it that, on the RSI. But it's more than likely to me that we're going to see some kind of medium-term bounce and short-term downtrend. Let me explain that again. I want to be very clear because people misunderstand me when I say something like that a lot. What I'm saying is that what seems most likely to me is that we're going to see some kind of short-term bearish movement, perhaps down to $4,000 because of this bearish pennant right here. And then because of the longer-term technicals, it seems to me that we're going to see some kind of bullish move. That's what I think is going to happen. Like I said, there are a lot of different things that can happen right here, guys. The market is still redeveloping itself after the break of the most important level of support in all of Bitcoin technical analysis. There is a lot of uncertainty in the market right now, but of the plethora of different things that could happen, what I just laid out seems to be the most likely. That seems to be what's going to happen. We're going to see what happens over the next couple of days anyway. And like I said, I want to make this very clear also. I'm not calling $4,000 the permanent bottom. I don't necessarily believe it's the permanent bottom. But right now, with RSI being as oversold as it is, we have to see some kind of bounce, or else we're just going to. And that really ties me into the last point of the TA today, and that has to do with whether or not the bears are exhausted, because we see that happen with the RSI. A lot of times the RSI can show you whether the bulls or the bears are exhausted, and right now it seems like the bears are the ones that are exhausted, because we've seen Bitcoin just crash and tank and dive and just whatever and jump off the metaphorical cliff. I know you guys like it when I say that. We've seen Bitcoin just not have a very good couple of days here. Bitcoin has just crashed dramatically. And a lot of times when you see a market move that quickly, you're going to see some kind of exhaustion coming from the bulls or the bears, depending on what direction you're moving in. And we've seen Bitcoin move south so incredibly quickly that it seems like, to me, most of the people that were going to sell have already sold. I know I said that back over here, but it's still the same thing, guys. There was a lot of selling pressure over here, because if there wasn't, we would have started moving up. But down here, we've sold so much Bitcoin. So much Bitcoin has been sold. Bitcoin has moved south so incredibly quickly that it seems to me like the market is going to be oversold, because if it weren't, why did we not already go below $4,000? Like, I'm not saying that we should have gone below $4,000, but if the bears weren't so exhausted, why haven't we gone below $4,000? Now, the one way to prove me wrong is if we go below $4,000, of course. We'll see what happens over the next 24 to 48 hours. We'll probably know by then whether or not we're going to set a level of support at $4,000. But based on the sentiment of the market and based on everything that I've looked at off camera, it seems to me like the bears are at least a little bit more exhausted than they were when this started. And like I said, a really good way to tell that is also from the technicals, from the RSI. A lot of times when RSI is this oversold, you're going to see the bears are exhausted. And when the RSI is this overbought, like it was in 2017, you're going to see the bulls are exhausted. And right now, I think the bears are exhausted, at least for the time being. Now, I did this a little bit out of order. Let's go ahead and do the crypto market recap. I missed a day and I completely forgot my entire setup. Let's go ahead and do this, and then I want to get on to a couple of fundamentals and talk about ICE delaying Bakkt, or Bakkt delaying Bakkt actually, and talk about a couple of other fundamentals. Anyway, let's give CoinMarketCap a little refresh here, and we can see Bitcoin across all exchanges is trading around 44.50, and it's down by about 2% over the last 24 hours. Nothing really to write home about now, guys. What we've seen over the last couple of days is, of course, Bitcoin moving into this triangle pattern with decreasing volume, which is typically what you see happen in a triangle consolidation pattern, a pennant like this. You see the volume drop off, and then normally we're going to see it come back in a big way when we break that. So watch out for a big break of that triangle pattern. Definitely a good place to put a trade in if you guys know what you're doing. I'm not going to get into that in today's video, though. XRP, again, is doing rather well. It's only down by about 1.78%, trading around 43 cents. Quite happy to see that. Very low volume on XRP, although it normally does have a lot lower volume than Ethereum and Bitcoin. Bitcoin's daily volume hovering around $5 billion. I like seeing a lot of volume on Bitcoin, even though we've seen a little less volume today than we did in the last couple of days, partially because of that bear pennant. But if we sort by the last 24 hours, as a matter of fact, the number one cryptocurrency by change is Factom. It's up by about 10%. And if we scroll down here, we can see that the vast majority of the market is still red, but nothing really all that bad. We see MOAC is almost down by over 10%, almost that double-digit loser, but just not quite. Factom is almost, as a matter of fact, also 10% up, but it's not. Anyway, there's not a whole lot to talk about here on CoinMarketCap, which is probably why I forgot to do it. I'm surprised I did that, guys. I don't think I've ever done that before. Anyway, like I said, not a whole lot we want to discuss here. One thing I did want to talk about is market cap. As you can see, market capitalization is hovering around that $150 billion market level. I meant to talk about that in the last video that went up. I didn't, but we do want to see Bitcoin, and well, we do want to see the total market hold that as a level of support, because that's another one of those psychological levels. It used to be it used to be $200 billion. Bitcoin, it used to be $100 billion. Currently, we're seeing both of them below that. I'd like to see them reestablish that somewhere. Perhaps Bitcoin can establish a psychological level of support at $75 billion, or around maybe $50 billion if we happen to go that low. Anyway, with all that out of the way, we're going to get a little silly here because I do want to go ahead and talk about the fundamentals. And guys, I've found a perfect clip. There's a fellow by the awesome name of JK in the Discord server. Guys, go say hi to JK because he has brought us this video today. I want to show you guys a video that basically epitomizes the market today. It has to do with a couple of apes. Let's go ahead and scroll back here. As you can see, we have the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission for the United States, and Bakkt holding the stretcher that Bitcoin is about to come and sit in. They're going to try and save the day from Bitcoin. And if we go ahead and play the video here, we can see that Bitcoin is getting on the stretcher, and well, that just sucks. They kind of ran off with us. We don't have Bitcoin being saved anymore. And as you can see, Bitcoin looks very sad because the fundamentals have abandoned him. Bitcoin is not doing very well today. Anyway, all jokes aside, one thing that we do want to talk about has to do with Bakkt, because Bakkt has been delayed. Bakkt is going back to the future and I don't know, I can't think of a pun for that. Anyway, guys, I'm still laughing about that clip. Anyway, like I said, this is a little bit of old news, but I did want to go ahead and discuss it here at the end of the video, since you guys have probably already heard about it, but I do want to throw my 2 cents in. If you guys weren't familiar with Bakkt, well, you might be new here. There's a video in the top right with the eye. I will go ahead and link a video where I talk about Bakkt. Basically, Bakkt is going to be a massive cryptocurrency exchange, a Bitcoin exchange, excuse me, launched by ICE, Intercontinental Exchange. Intercontinental Exchange also owns something that you may be familiar with called the NYSE, also known as the New York Stock Exchange. It is a massive, massive business that owns a lot of stock exchanges. Definitely a big deal for Bakkt to be stepping into the space and for Bakkt to be created. In fact, it was created just for Bitcoin. For Bitcoin futures. As you can see, it's a Bitcoin futures trading program, and it's actually been delayed. It was going to be launched, I believe it was in December. It was in December, and it has now been delayed until January 24th, 2019. That's the date that they're looking for. They are going to be trying to launch it there. That's what CEO Kelly, I think that's pronounced Loeffler, said in a Medium post a little while ago. We can go ahead and open that real quick and read what she said. But there are a couple of things that are concerning here. One thing that I've seen a lot of people concerned about is the timing on this, because a lot of people, including myself, have called Bakkt one of the biggest news stories, one of the biggest bullish news stories for Bitcoin of all of 2018, and now it's been delayed. Guys, Bakkt and the people that run Bakkt, the CEO of Bakkt, everyone that has anything to do with Bakkt, that has any power over Bakkt, know exactly what they're doing. They've been in markets for a very long time. Bakkt was created by Intercontinental Exchange, who owns the New York Stock Exchange and many other stock exchanges that you've probably heard of before. It is not a small operation, and they do know exactly what they're doing. So it does seem a little weird that they would announce this delay when they could have announced it at any time right after such a major bearish price movement as the one that we've seen over the last week or so. It does seem a little strange that we've just seen that happen now, because what seems, well, I'm not going to say this is what's happening, but what a lot of people are claiming is happening is that Bakkt is delaying this in the hopes of crashing Bitcoin lower so that people can buy in Bitcoin lower when the exchange launches, and then more people that get on the exchange when it first launches get Bitcoin at a cheaper price, Bitcoin starts moving up, and then they get happy about it, and then they stay on the exchange. There are a lot of people talking about theories like that. And I'm not necessarily going to discount them because it is a little bit of weird timing. Although I do also want to play devil's advocate for Bakkt and say that perhaps something's come up in the back on the back end and they have delayed it. My point is that Bakkt has been delayed until January 24th of 2019. But that's not exactly a bad thing. I've heard a lot of people talking about how this is a bad thing, but I do want to put my 2 cents on it. You guys know I always try to look for the silver lining in things and what things may mean on the optimistic side. So let's go ahead and talk about that. One thing I was kind of worried about with Bakkt, and I'm honestly not really all that upset to see Bakkt being delayed, is that I was worried that Bakkt was going to be launching somewhere here in mid-December of 2019, and Bitcoin was going to be extremely bearish during it, and then we weren't going to be able to capture that bullish exuberance from Bakkt, and the bullish news story of Bakkt launching was going to be wasted. But now, since Bakkt has been delayed another month, that gives Bitcoin another month to stabilize down here in the market, try and find a bottom, and start trading sideways rather than trading down, so that we can capture some more of that bullish exuberance that is sure to come from the launch of Bakkt. Now, I think a lot of the bullishness from Bakkt being a thing has already been priced in, but I think when the day it launches, that is going to bring a big green candlestick, and I'd rather see that happen in a sideways trading market, or perhaps even in an upwards trading market, than in a downwards trading market and lose a lot of that exuberance that we perhaps otherwise could have had. So I'm not totally upset that Bakkt is being delayed, because perhaps that market is going to be healthier for a Bakkt launch when it actually launches. And also, guys, perhaps that's one of the reasons Bakkt has actually been delayed. There are a lot of people also saying that Bakkt doesn't actually have CFTC approval yet. I believe down here they talk about how they're working with the CFTC, as they can see. On the regulatory front, we continue to work closely with the CFTC as they conduct their thorough review of the Bakkt Bitcoin Daily Future contract, the Bitcoin Daily Futures contract, and the Bakkt warehouse. There are a lot of people speculating that perhaps Bakkt hasn't actually gotten all the approval it needs, so it needs a couple more weeks so that it can finish getting all of its approval. Time's going to tell and all that, guys. I think when Bakkt does launch, it's going to be very, very good for the market, and I do think it's going to bring a lot of bullishness. Tell me in the comment section down below what you think of all the TA today. I know this video is a little bit longer, but normally you guys complain about the video being too short, not about being too long, so hopefully you got some good value out of this video. Let's go ahead and rehash everything we talked about, because we did talk about a lot. What I think is most likely going to happen, and this is a small likelihood. Like I said, there's probably 20 different things that can happen here, all taking up some of that pie of the likelihood. Probably like a 20% likelihood, but still the most likely thing to happen, in my opinion, is that Bitcoin breaks this bearish, comes down here, and then bounces. That seems to be what's most likely. There's a lot of other things that could happen here, guys. Bitcoin could also bounce here, break bullish out of this, and go up. But overall, I think the sentiment is, over the next couple of days, we're going to see a little bit of green come into Bitcoin on the daily chart, so that we can see this RSI start coming back up to healthier levels. Even up to 30 would be good. I think we're going to see something like that happen. From there, we also talked about how I think the bears are potentially exhausted, simply because we've seen so much selling lately, and normally when the market moves this quickly in either direction, either the bulls or the bears, whichever faction is pushing the market in that direction, is going to get exhausted. It seems to me like a lot of the people that have already sold are the ones that were going to sell, and a lot of the people that haven't sold, well, they're not going to sell, because there are a lot of hodlers down here, guys, that are simply not ever going to sell, myself included. There are a lot of people like that. And I think enough of them are around at this level that perhaps that helps us put some kind of bottom in. We also talked about Bakkt and Bakkt being delayed. That's, like I said, not as big of a bad news story as some people are making out to be, in my opinion. Bakkt is still going to launch. ICE has invested millions of dollars in Bakkt. Bakkt is going to launch. It's just a matter of time. So we're going to see that bullish news story come out. Anyway, guys, I do hope you enjoyed the video. I do want to thank each and every single one of you for watching, as always. And if you enjoyed this video, definitely consider dropping a like and hitting that subscribe button, smashing the notification bell, guys. It does help out the channel if you do it, and I would be appreciative if you did it. So with all that out of the way, I do want to thank each and every single one of you for watching again, and I will be seeing you guys in the next video. Peace.